Hi, I'm Bill Simmons, Artistic Director of the Phoenix Theater Cultural Center in beautiful downtown Indianapolis. And today I am delighted to be talking to my colleague and good friend, the Executive Director of the National New Play Network, Nan Barnett. How are you, Nan?
I'm well, thank you. How are you today?
We're coming through some stuff. But as we take this in the middle of February, I really do. I feel like some really hard conversations have happened within the Phoenix Theater family, and there were things that like in families, kind of like August Osage County, where you got some come to Jesus, come to Moses, come to Muhammad moments. They were probably necessary for us to move back forward. So I'm okay. How are you? Then I actually tried to start all these really with a check-in with the other person. So like, really, where are you in the midst of all of this?
I'm pretty well, thank you. It's been, NNPN was given a chance to prove the service part of its service organization title in the midst of all of this.
Indeed.
We were very lucky in that we had already decentralized our offices, so staff was already across the country. So we were remote working every day already, so that system was already in place for us. And then because of the work that NNPN began in really 2017, 18, that led us to a new strategic plan, we had been very engaged in the concept of equity, diversity, and inclusion within the network and within the American theater. NNPN in its fiscal year 2020 to 2025 strategic plan committed to serving as a model for what we felt the equitable, diverse, inclusive ecosystem of the new play field could look like. And we knew that we were in a kind of unique position to be able to shine some light on best practices. And so that included a total restructuring of the mission, vision, and values, and the bylaws, and the governance portion of what we do at NNPN. So we were really well equipped to be able to handle some of the fast moving things that were happening around this summer of protest. And then the subsequent things like We See You White American Theater that came out of that, we were able to respond quickly and thoroughly, and really with a lot of deep thought having already been done and examination already been processed. And that led us to a position where we could really dive in and help our theaters individually as well as the field. So it's been good.
Before we get too far away from this, I do want to get back to what you said about, how NNPN was in the vanguard of organizations who are really starting to recognize how we have to have strong commitments to how we are going to change culturally organizations, right? And there's statements of solidarity are good, but that is not goals and objectives and measurable benchmarks for how you change an institution. And I think this is what I was so excited to have this conversation with you, Nan, because like you said, you guys we, NNPN, but specifically the leadership, recognize we represent 125 theaters across the country. We've got to model how as many of these start making the shift as possible. And I'm just going to say, I was like, oh, this seems very overwhelming. And because of the summer of 2020, I'm like, no, I understand now exactly why this has to happen. And I need to know, help me do it. So just a little bit like when you started the NNPN leadership, and I know I was on the board, but I wasn't in my position at that time. When did the conversations start happening, and when were the consultants brought in? And just to show how far in the past we have started doing this work as NNPN. So I think that's my question. I think you probably got it.
Yeah, so in I guess it was 2017, 18, there was a sort of sudden and surprising opening of the floodgates of leadership in American theater. I think we all knew that there was going to be a wave of retirements coming. Those people who started theaters in the mid and late 80s, when kind of the second wave of the regional theater movement, there was a whole group of those leaders who were going to be aging out of their jobs. And we'd all been kind of looking at that. But then there was the sudden thing. Part of it was driven by the Me Too movement as it was building, and there were people that were taken outed from their jobs. But there was just kind of this weird shift where all of a sudden there were all these open jobs in large American theaters. And those jobs, there was a call to make sure that leaders of color were included in the process and moving into those positions. And I started to realize that we, the American theater, had done a really great job of training and raising up leaders of color and women, especially, that there were all these kind of superstars waiting to take these jobs, but we had done nothing about making sure they had the support they needed when they got into the job, i.e. a board that was prepared to have someone who didn't look like what the traditional American theater artistic director looked like. So we began having those conversations. I began having those conversations as I traveled around the country and was really thinking about what we as NNPN might do. NNPN, has from its very beginning been this organization that really loved to wrestle with the hard questions.
Definitely.
It was an organization that was created out of, what are we, 23 years ago, I guess, out of this thing of how do you get a play that's not by someone famous and has not had a New York run to have a life in the theater. That's why the organization started. And so I like to say that, any question that when a bunch of theater people get together, they're all talking about, but nobody's really doing anything about, that's where NNPN wants to step in and do something. So that's how the Rolling World Premiere Program was created. That's how New Play Exchange came to be, the online database that we run. So it felt like a good question for NNPN to get down and dirty with. And out of that, it was time for us to begin a new strategic planning process. And when we had finished our last strategic plan, in the very last part of that planning session, we said the next thing that NNPN has to deal with is its whiteness. Our leaders were white. We were led mostly by white men over 50. And there were a lot of women rising in the ranks. I had seen a real change in leadership. Women were getting hired more, but also white. And we knew that it was something that we wanted to try to tackle. So as we began that strategic planning process in 2018, we knew that was going to need to be a top priority. And we began with 2 days of meetings where we focused on undoing systemic racism and just really watched people wake up, people starting to understand that even though they were programming with actors of color, an occasional writer of color, that it was so much deeper and darker and more ingrained in our society and in the actual structure of the American theater, that it was going to take more than just, I'll program one more play by a woman, or I'll program one more play by a person of color. We had these great consultants that we worked with that led us on kind of a dual journey of both making a strategic plan in the traditional way, as well as really looking at everything we did through this lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I kept thinking at every step, I was walking, every meeting I would go into, I'd be like, this is going to be the one, this is going to be the one where it all blows up. But it didn't, because we did it in a way that we would do this much and then ask for buy-in and bring people together, and then go to the next step and do the work that we needed to come to consensus, and then go to the next step. And it was a long process. We passed that strategic plan officially in Sacramento in December of 2019.
Yeah, that was my first meeting.
Your first meeting.
That was a biggie. I'm like, what the hell am I voting on? And because of course I had not had that runway of this process.
Right.
I was like, wow, this is monumental. I'm like, where do I even begin? Like, to try to implement this as a straight middle-aged white man running a theater company and having replaced a person of color in a difficult situation. I'm like, wow. I began to realize, holy mackerel, I've just got to sit and listen for a while, because I don't even know where to get a hold of this tiger by its tail. But yeah, I could feel that it was a huge thing, though. Even in NNPN, when we sat at B Street in Sacramento, I was just like, wow, this is huge, huge.
Well, decoupling membership from governance was massive, and I wasn't sure, because prior to this, the board was made up of one voting representative, usually either the artistic director or the managing director, from each of those core member theaters. And we took that power away from them with their blessing after working through this, and crafted a board that we laid out a 7-layer demographic chart that included not only race and gender, which are, priorities, but also the amount of experience that person had within the network, where they lived, what size theater they worked with most often. And most importantly, I think, brought in, so half of the board is still folks that are affiliated with core members, but the other half are artists and ambassadors and associate member theaters. So now that group has been elevated to a place of power. Our board, I don't really know exactly what our age range is, but we're from early 30s up through 65 plus. We are people who have spent their whole careers in new works and people who are fairly new to it. There are playwrights and there are patrons. There are artistic and management and literary leaders, but there are also freelance dramaturgs. And it has been astounding. It is also now, we set a goal for ourselves that the board would be 50% people of color by 2025. We actually got to 47 or 8% in year one of the plan. And as of January, we are at 55% people of color. We are better than 70% women. We include people from every geographic area, everything from our uber small theaters with budgets of less than $150,000 a year, up through some of our largest company, Denver Center, has a representative on the board. There's such an energy and focus and a belief in the work and a belief in the organization that it's been just a delight. And to be able to say to other organizations, you can do this too. It might be a different set of steps, might take you a little longer, but you have to start moving in this direction. I love to talk to people about just doing the basic things. Go to your census and figure out what the population breakdown is in your region that and so for some of our theaters, that are in highly urbanized, like you guys are right downtown, but we also have theaters that are in the middle of nowhere, and we have theaters that are the cultural icon of their town, and there are theaters that are teeny tiny, getting ready, starting to make a difference. Um, each of them should be able to have an impact in their community that reflects their community. So
Yeah.
look at your community and say, what's our makeup? Where are we? And does our board, does our staff, does our programming reflect what the community look like? Because I believe that the organizations that are going to survive this time are the organizations that are really truly engaged with their community. Not we have an engagement officer who makes sure the church ladies come for the February Black History Month play, but really, really, they know the people in their community. They know the other service organizations in their communities. I think the more theaters think of themselves as service organizations, that they are there to serve the community, and that community includes everyone in their area, just not just the people with disposable income, not just the highly educated, not just the people who are of a skin tone similar to ours. It should be for everyone, especially in a time like this where people are, especially when we get to where we can gather again, people are hungry for knowing more about each other, I think, in a
Yeah.
way, especially with what's happened in our political situation in the last 5 years here in America. It's important that we know about people who are different than we are. And theater has always been that. Two things: holding up the mirror, right? So reflecting humanity back to itself, and that ability to bring someone's life, whether it's a moment or their entire history, in front of you, that when that someone is different, but you can see the similarities. That empathy building piece of theater, the knowledge building piece of theater. I mean, I always laugh that I'm an actor from childhood, and I have a degree from a conservatory, and I have zero education in my life. I never had a world geography class ever. Don't know how that happened, but never had. But let me tell you, if I've done a play about that area, I know where that, any place I know where it is in the world, I know because I was either in or produced a play about that place.
And you
So,
researched it, right? Like
and
if
then
you're,
you're right, you do
yeah,
it, you learn it, right? So the idea that theater can be this, can help us reopen our doors. And when we reopen them, that they can be open for everybody.
mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
really, really exciting to me. And I believe that the theaters in this country that recognize that, those are the theaters that are going to make it through this. Because they're doing,
Nan, if we edit this, if Bob Lehman, our marketing guy, edits this down to like 3 minutes, that's the 3 minutes, right? That I think that is something I hope as people watch this interview, that is the thing, is we have this moment, we have these facilities, we have a passion for the art. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, Jack Ruler, he said it in a meeting and it so resonated with me. You know, he was run mixed blood forever up there in Minneapolis, and they're blocks away from where George Floyd was killed. And you know, he said we opened the building up to being a shelter, to feed people and house people if they needed it. And he said we're a social service organization that uses theater as one of its tools for healing and for addressing a community's needs. And that's the thing, like the Phoenix Theater Cultural Center is on, I really do. I think we are on the precipice of this beautiful um, opportunity to that when we're going to ease back in by having an outdoor theater festival almost for the summer, performing arts festival. There are these shipping containers, and there's going to be a stage, and then we have a bar where there'll be some food service so that people can come have a glass of wine and a boxed meal and watch Asante Children's Theater or Summer Stock Stage and their work and the comedy sports and maybe Young Actors Theater of Indiana. And it's going to right now end with IUPUI's Onyx Fest, which is a celebration of theater by and not by, not for, because it should be for everyone, but by artists of color. And they need help kind of, producing it really thoughtfully. And so, yeah, I just think that this is an opportunity for those of us who have facilities that are in the hearts of urban areas to be like, we can actually be a lot of things to a lot of people. I
Yeah.
won't all to all, but it's going to be a lot for a lot.
But I
And
mean, even like that, all of those things, what else can you do to enhance your community support, right? So can people get $5 off if they bring 4 cans of food?
oh,
Can you have some sort of services, get a haircut while you wait? Can what could you give, and how do you make sure that in that, especially in that situation where people who don't normally come to a theater might be more comfortable coming to some sort of outside event, if it's more of a concert feel or a picnic kind of feel. How do you make sure that those people who don't normally walk in your door because it feels like, oh, that's a theater and that's too fancy? How do you make sure those people get into that outdoor space so that they then get caught up by the excitement of live entertainment and then will come to you, or you will go to them, right? I mean, there's so many ways to think about um, serving, uh, and I think that there's something, especially with those outdoor spaces, that's a way to crack open something we haven't really done before. I've been I downloaded the Jill Sabul like 7th grade project out of city theater where it's in a drive-in, they've
yeah, 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 yeah.
and just watching the trailer, it was like, oh yeah, why not? Why not? I mean, this is the time for why not. This is
Yes.
totally a time for why not.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
Or yes, and my friend was like, she's like, think of it, we should be thinking of this as an improv exercise. Yes, and then yes, and yes, and as I was building my artistic vision for this feasibility study case statement, that our consultants were like, Bill, when we interview you, you just talk about debt and structure and debt. And she said, where's the vision? And so I was like, oh yeah. And so when I kind of sent it out to the universe for some, I sent it to colleagues and friends and artists locally and around the Midwest. And I'm like, if the Phoenix Theater Cultural Center could be anything when we emerge from this, what would it be? And she said, well, you're asking the yes and exercise, yes and this, and yes and this, and yes and this. But everything that came back to me were things that I had thought about in the last 4 or 5 years about what this facility and this art institution, because that's the thing. I'm like, we have to stop using organization because we now have a physical institution that we need to steward, and we need to make sure that financially it's supporting that, and also the people we're serving, including the artists and the staff and the board. I mean, we're all in this to, I think, make a difference. And this is our opportunity to yes or why not do that. You're not doing the old thing anymore, and when this pandemic ends, you're probably definitely not going to be doing the old thing, at least not in the ways you were doing it.
yeah, we at NNPN, we've been working with this idea of growing forward,
Yeah.
right? We're not going back, we're growing forward. And we're starting to think a lot about how can we use NNPN and its tools like New Play Exchange, like the new Bridge program, to make sure the American theater grows back better, to borrow
Grows back better. That's lovely. Grows back better.
better. Because I feel as though the opportunities are boundless.
Yeah.
And if we have to have this once in a century reset that we are being forced through right now, and I think we've all learned so much about ourselves and the people around us and the things that truly matter.
Mm-hmm.
We can't forget that
Mm.
when we go back to our worlds.
Oh no.
We've been talking about at NNPN, I know you've been a part of these conversations, like how do we even change how we rehearse, how long we rehearse, doing away with 10 out of 12s, making sure that staff people, put down their phones and computers at the end of the day and they really take a break. We just have instituted a no meeting Tuesday here at NNPN because we were finding we couldn't get our work done for doing our work,
Right,
right?
right.
It's a meeting. And we had a half a day last week that was a no meeting day. And I was astounded at how much I got done, right? So
Yeah.
thinking in different ways. It does not have to be, a 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. grind, which is what most of us in the theater lived. Um, and you've heard me speak about my regrets for having not taken care of myself as a younger person, and literally the physical damage that I have done to my body from having worked so hard and so long for something I loved, and I loved
Yes.
doing it. And but it's physically wrecking, and I will deal with that for the rest of my life. And I am determined I'm going to do everything I can to keep people younger than me, specifically women and specifically people in theater, uh, from doing that. There have to be boundaries.
Yeah.
There really have to be boundaries. And as much as we like, we're artists and we're living for our art and all of that, um, I would be making better art if I were maybe had taken better care of myself. Or I certainly probably would be making art longer than I would.
Well, I just want to say though, Nan, I think the way you have stewarded NNPN in my tenure at the Phoenix, which has been almost 3 years, but I can see the respect that goes across the entire spectrum of NNPN colleagues. Just this respect because my own therapist, which I also, in addition to being like I'm very public about my recovery from alcoholism, is that I have a therapist, and something she's been saying to me was like, Bill, she said, you need to be the actor right now. It is a production in some ways because you bring your heart to the work, and she said you have to do that. And I think, Nan, this is your art. I really do. The stewarding us through this. Obviously, you were stewarding it before the monumental awareness we all came to terms with around June 1 of 2020. We're like, okay, this is fundamentally broken. The fact that you already and the leadership of NNPN, we were starting that work 2.5 years prior to the horrific summer we had. I think you are living your art. So for what it's worth, and I thank you so much for what you just said about your health being compromised, because there's been a couple of times where I've had people actually, Bill, you have to stop because you are so worked up in this moment. I think you're going to have a heart attack. And I do worry because my father died at 50, not quite 59, of what it was, a myocardial infarction. I'm like, and I do think like, well, I'd like to get my brother and I were in our 30s when our father transitioned. I'd like to get my daughter out of college, So I think that's a very, very, very important thing. I consider you the sage of the American theater. That you're saying you just have to stop working this way, because what I've learned in the pandemic is like, you know what? I like my personal life as much as I like my professional life. Like I enjoy
Right?
puttering in my yard and going to the state parks with my wife and my dogs, and occasionally our teenage daughter if we can get her away from Minecraft and her friends online. Tonight we're going, friends are renting a whole movie theater to see The Big Lebowski. I'm like, how much did that cost? Like a couple $100. I'm like, you've got a big ass theater for $200 and we're gonna watch The Big Lebowski. So like June doesn't want to dress up because she won't do that kind of stuff. I'm like, well, I'm wearing a robe and wearing my slippers and I'm gonna sit there and watch the dude. But I just think, like if the theater were producing, I'd be down at the Phoenix tonight hosting donors and whatever.
Right. Right. Yeah. The idea of having to get back out, I have to say it's a little daunting. I think I
Yeah.
have, I have become a big fan of my couch.
Yep. Me too.
Uh, it's never ever me, ever, never, ever me.
Yep.
And I'm trying to, when because NNPN, because our staff spans 4 time zones, we usually I do 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. for my work hours. And I try to leave my phone and my computer in the office and walk out and have a real evening. And I'm sure it's not helping the size of my backside, but I do enjoy it very much.
I think that's another thing. As an actor, I'm like, take the note, Bill, which is like, you know what? You're not ready to go back into the theater yet. I mean, obviously we can't, but it's just like, yeah, right. I'll know when I'm ready to get back out there. And if we open this outdoor season on the outdoor stage, the park at the end of May, I actually think I'm going to be ready to be out there. And it's going
Yeah,
to be,
it'll be exciting.
yeah. But no, I think like listening to what the universe is telling people right now. And I think those of us who are like, you know what? This feels really good. I'm not hurting anyone else. I'm helping myself quite a bit. Let's just watch Netflix tonight. June and I are alternating between the Pretend It's a City, the Fran Lebowitz,
Oh, it's so good.
and then I'm re-binge watching Schitt's Creek.
Oh, yep, did that too.
Yeah, because I never rarely rewatch things, but I'm such a fan of really good character work. And
Mm,
she's the gold standard. But I also think Annie Murphy's like, I mean, that what the character work, that the fact that she and Dan Levy are the same person and they're playing siblings. I think that I tell my Meisner students, I'm like, you have to watch this to watch the two of them. They'll be in scenes together and they literally are the same person. I'm like, that is remarkable character work. And
yeah,
you believe those are their parents, you know?
yeah, it's great. I did a early on. I binge watched West Wing just to try
Oh
to
yeah.
get myself back into what
Yeah.
sanity was.
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, and I the new what um, the Goes Wrong show. Uh, I'm not usually a fan of theater related shows, things that, but it is so well done. It's just delightful. Um, of course, The Flight Attendant. Have you watched that yet?
I haven't, and I didn't know Steve Yockey who was writing it for it, and we've done Steve Yockey. In fact, when Brian Fonseca was the artistic director, we did the Octopus, and he wanted me to be in it, and I used to work up at Jeff Daniels Theater up in Michigan all the time, and I had a contract that summer. Otherwise, when I met Steve Yockey for the first time, he was talking about the Octopus, and Brian did it of course, Brian was always like, we'll figure it out. In a tech weekend, the flood happened and it blew out all of the footlights down in
I
Phoenix.
remember.
It
Yeah.
shut off all the electricity, and Steve Yockey was there for that. And Brian was like, "Well, that happened." But anyway, the flight attendant, yeah, Steve Yockey, and an NNPN beloved playwright.
Yeah, it's well that that's the thing. TV is so good right now because those writer rooms are filled with playwrights.
Yeah.
This Is Us, whatever it is, season 4, whatever now, it's kind of gone. But the scene work in This Is Us, every little individual scene is so beautifully done. And that's because it's all playwrights. It's all playwrights in that room.
And stage
Uh,
actors too, right? I mean, a lot of those are like, I think that's the other thing is like, I think because I mean, I don't know why, but even when I was growing up and in my 20s, whatever, TV sort of had this stigma. And I'm like, yeah, but like good TV, like, I mean, I think The West Wing was part of that evolution. And then I think about, I think even like 30 something, when I was a kid, I remember thinking there's something that's different about this show, right? And those actors, for people who didn't like that, like, it's so slow. I'm like, yeah, these are like what people do in their lives. Like relationships are long and complex, and they're not these explosive, like the episode I saw of Schitt's Creek last night. Johnny was trying to remind her of her daytime soap operas. He goes, "Well, I think that was the episode where you were ejected through a skylight."
yeah.
I'm just like, but 30 something is like, no, these are what real lives are like. And it's funny you should mention the West Wing, because I've been thinking about the West Wing, and I just remember when Stockard Channing showed up as the first lady, and he gets up to the private quarters of the White House, and she's right on him about some issue. He goes, "Okay, hold on." He goes, what is the latest palace intrigue? That whole idea that like the king never has a moment's rest because there's
Right.
always something to be dealt with. And I've sort of like the Phoenix, just this year we've had with this pandemic, I'm like, okay, what is the latest palace intrigue that I need to be aware of? But anyway, yeah, so it's that shows back in the zeitgeist for me as well. And why, and just out of curiosity, so you went back to the West Wing, you said, just to be reminded of what like a sane administration was like. I mean, there must have been more than just that. Wasn't there more than just that to it for you?
Well, it's, again, wonderful actors doing really solid character work. The writing is when the president speaks and it's beautiful and uplifting, and even in when there's some sort of disaster, there's always that calm, steady, and good people surrounding him, everyone trying to do their best and make, and they're people, they have foibles, and but yeah, just the solidness of it, the decency of it. I think I was really drawn, and I'm an actor person. Decency is not normally at the top of my list, but yeah, boy, it was really wonderful. I was doing West Wing and Cheers.
Oh yeah.
I hadn't watched Cheers in years, and talk about tight comedy work. The physical comedy work in that show is amazing. The Ted Denson, Shelley Long characters, Coach. Oh,
Oh, I know.
just it is really, really good, solid comedy, and never even when it's silly, it's so well done. It's so tight. Just watching how they move bottles and glasses around the bar all the time. It's a little, show in itself. Um,
I,
so yeah.
yeah, I went down the rabbit hole of Wikipedia once about something about, because his name kept coming up, the actor who played Coach Nicholas Colasanto, I think his name
Mhm.
was. And you see that, I think people think, well, that was who he was, right? Or he was some variation of that. And when you look at his body of work, he must have been such an extraordinarily intelligent man. I mean, he directed and he acted and he crossed genres. And I'm like, and that, speaking to that character work, he was so profoundly convincing as that character. And then you realize, oh, he must have been so beautiful to work with. I thought about Hal Holbrook, and a friend of mine had worked with him once, and he goes, he was just what you thought he was is who he was, right? That sense of like, this is the work, and yeah,
There's
yeah.
the ability to compartmentalize your life.
Hmm.
And I found it really fascinating because I always remember as an actor, I always said, I'm an actor. My husband, Gordon, was an artist because he could become anything, be anything, and fully embody it. I was always the actor that, yes, I'm doing my lines and being in character, but I've also got, one level of my brain is doing the grocery list, and another level of my brain is checking out the audience, and
Yeah.
another level of my brain, this is, of course, this trying to run a company and be on stage.
Oh, yes.
Nightmare. Uh,
Horrific.
so I always, that ability to compartmentalize is really fascinating to me
Hmm.
because I don't have it. And everything in my life bleeds into everything else, which is maybe one of the things that, because I feel so strongly about taking care of people, that
Yeah.
as a human, and then I think that certainly shows in the work that I do, whether it was back when I was running a theater or now with NNPN, and harder,
Yeah.
and especially when you are seen as a leader, it's really hard. I had a like bad day last week, and it was so funny. NNPN, for all we do for all of the world, we're a staff of 4 basically, and
You feel like a staff of 15.
I know, but we're 4 of us, but each of them, uh, individually checked in on me later in the day, just hey, how you doing, what you do, and I want to inspire that in them as leaders to be really human. I had a situation in a meeting the other day where someone said something that was just really not appropriate, and it was not a meeting I was running, and I didn't have the opportunity to check it in the moment. And as soon as the meeting was over, I had everybody on the staff was like, "What are we doing about that? Because that's not the way we work."
Hmm.
And it's good. I mean, it's good that they have been empowered to call that out.
Mhm.
They're all rising leaders themselves, and I hope that that is something they will continue to check.
Mhm.
At the end of the year for NNPN, when we were doing all of our business meetings after showcase, we kept a little chart of the things people were looking forward to or wanted to take with them from what they've learned in this time. And there were 4 of them ultimately that seemed really important. And we've been trying to examine the things that we're doing through those 4 different, not tunnels, but bubbles, right? So one of them was about innovation, continuing to innovate. We've all learned so much. Look at us on Zoom, right? We
Yeah.
we're on Zoom all day long, and we've produced a showcase on Zoom. We've produced an annual conference on Zoom. So that continuing to take what we've learned from now and move that forward. The second was about connection and collaboration, which is such a huge part of what we do at NNPN. And um, we have, because we've been having these weekly member meetings, I know people that I didn't know before the pandemic.
Yeah, I formed relationships through those chats that now we're like sharing scripts and best practices, and yeah,
Absolutely, it's wonderful, and we're not going to let that go.
yeah.
The other things are about human-centeredness. We've been talking about that in member meetings and really focusing on how do you take care of your staff, how do you take care of your artists, how do you take care of your audience, how do you take care of your board.
How do you model the lifestyle you're telling everybody they should live, which is,
Right,
40 hours is plenty. 42, we are going to have those weeks, this 50, 60-hour norms.
just not going back, right? And
Because you're
then
modeling unhealthy practices. If you,
and the last one then is sustainability and stamina.
Mhm.
That goes back to that human centeredness, which also goes back to being able to be collaborative, which also goes back to being innovative. So those are kind of the buzzwords that we're thinking a lot about. Not buzzwords, because that implies that they are less than they are. They are real places that we want to put energy into those 4 things. Um, and that feels as though we have to model it.
Yep.
If we're going to talk about human centeredness, then that kind of comment cannot happen unchecked. If we're
Right.
going to talk about innovation, we can't be scared of doing another annual conference online. And we have to say, because last year we had to pivot so quickly. We were one of the first national organizations to do it. We want, the technology has changed so drastically. We were having yesterday a meeting and discussing who we needed to take an OBS class. And I thought, I didn't know what OBS was a year ago.
What is OBS?
Well, now you're going to ask me.
Because there's just enough Catholic in me. I'm like, online Bible school? I'm sure this is like, people are going to watch this like, oh, Bill and Nan, just stop talking. But I honestly got to have no what that is. So I'm going to have to check that out after we're done. I'm like, I'm
How
not doing
you,
online Bible school, Nan.
it's about how you host events, which I guess online Bible.
Oh, online business systems or probably is something like that. I thought you guys did a fabulous job with comp.
I think it was, but we want it to be better, right?
Oh yeah, well, yeah,
No,
we're a theater
and
piece.
what the technology we've learned in the last year and how far the technology has come, there's just options that we didn't take advantage of last year or didn't exist last year. We want to make sure we get those things in. And as we think about showcase going forward, we're gonna being able to have that talent from all over the country so that playwrights got their first choices for actors, first choices for directors, because we weren't having to fly them all somewhere.
Yeah, those
So
were some kick-ass readings, man. I was like hooked on that first one, Mother of Exiles. I'm like, of course, our budgets are so tight, and then the debt. I'm like, where would we get all these people? I mean, the union actors and all this stuff. But boy, I just sat there, I'm like, this is some really important work that happened this year in terms of the quality of the plays. Not that we haven't had good quality in the past, but all of them, like these, all are like producible scripts, and they're,
and that's what that examining everything you do through that lens of equity, diversity, inclusion,
mhm.
because because we changed how we were adjudicating and who was reading scripts, and we changed what we asked people for, right? It was no longer, do you think this would be good for the network? Do you think is your theater interested? It was about, how did the script make you feel? Did
Yeah.
you experience something? Did you learn something you didn't know before? And
Yep.
out of that came this amazing group of scripts, which purely by coincidence or happenstance, I guess maybe, were by 5 women of color, um, which was great to be able to celebrate. We don't, uh, we read blind up until the final round.
Hmm.
And so when we got there and all of a sudden the scripts that were rising to the top just happened to all be by women and happened to all be by women of color, that felt really great. Again, it was another step forward in that mission of bringing diverse voices to the American theater, and that, walking the walk.
Yeah, yeah, it was abundantly clear to me that, yeah, you're doing what we all set out to do with, I need to keep using the pronoun we, because ultimately it's a network and it's a service organization that really is representing, what are we still at, 125 member theaters? Is that what we're
Yeah, we've not had any theaters close.
Yeah, which is, I think, is amazing.
Amazing. Now it may happen as we get further down the road, of course, but theaters kind of went into three buckets. There were those that chose to go into hibernation
Hmm.
and just step back, take some downtime. There were those theaters that went all into the digital world and are producing more content than they were producing live, because it's faster and I won't say easier by any means, but they people were really able to turn things around. And then there are those companies that chose to really invest this time in their facilities, in their staff, in new play development. I'm really hopeful because we've had so many theaters that don't normally do new work
Hmm.
come to New Play Exchange and find plays
Yeah.
and do them.
I
Uh,
think it's becoming the new standard. I had a conversation with Janet Allen at the Indiana Repertory Theater on Tuesday afternoon, because we're down to like the 5 shows we're probably going to produce, and she has, being a Lort Theater, she's like, well, I'm going to do that one. So she's like, oh yeah, I've been on New Play Exchange constantly, and I mean, I don't know how long Janet's been going there, but that clearly is her go-to. Like, she's like, I'm able to put in that search engine. I'm looking for this, and this, and boom, boom, boom. And so she said, I've been spending all kinds of hours on there. So I think it's becoming kind of the industry standard,
yeah,
which is,
we saw a huge uptick in rights inquiries after the pandemic began, uh,
mhm.
which was odd because you're thinking nobody's producing, but they're producing readings and they're doing online stuff. And as we begin to roll out the new platform, New Play Exchanges migrating to a whole new platform, and there's a ton of new features coming. The most, I think, immediately impactful is going to be the actor platform. So right now, there's a platform for readers, which is kind of a little bit of everybody, and writers, which are playwrights, and organizations. There's going to be an added actor platform that's specifically about how do you find the scripts that are right for you as an artist? How do you find the monologues you need? How do you get notified when a play comes up that has the perfect bill character in it? Um, so that's really exciting. But I think the next thing then will be audience. I think we will turn our eyes towards bringing in just a group of people that are interested in reading scripts.
Oh yeah, I think we've got donors. I think you've met the Cheryl and Ray Waldman. I'm like, that's something I bet Cheryl would, totally love to just go on there and browse
And
scripts. And
play around. Yeah.
I got an email from a colleague who runs a not-for-profit theater, not-for-profit, Royal not-for-profit, a community theater in Buffalo, New York. And he's like, Bill, I was just reading the Magnolia Ballet by Terry Guest, and he goes, your comment is on there. He's like, I love that play. And so I've got, it's starting to have for me, the network, the New Play Exchange, like people's aesthetics I line up with, and they line up with mine. Like we're there, it's happening in NPX, and it's like, oh, you read this and you liked it because I liked it too. And Sonia Fernandez, I mean, that's one of the best gifts that NNPN has given me, particularly during the pandemic, is either launching relationships that I didn't have or strengthening those that had started. So I'd gotten to know really Sonia Fernandez before we were in Atlanta for Showcase. Good Lord, was that 14 months ago? It feels like it could have been 40 years ago or
Yeah,
2 weeks.
absolutely. Who knows?
And she sent me this beautiful play called Don't Eat the Mangoes. And
Oh
if anybody
yeah.
watches this and goes to NPX, read Don't Eat the Mangoes because it will tear you apart. And I read it on the plane from Indy to Atlanta. And I saw it in Atlanta. I'm like, oh, Sonia, that's a great play. I'm like, I'm just trying to imagine how we would produce it at this particular moment. But yeah, so like Freddie Ashley at, Actors Express in Atlanta. And of course, I'm close with Olivia Lilly, and then Michael Burke is somebody who's starting to get a lot of traction as a theater director across the country. And it's been a real gift to me. And NPX is sort of now becoming that intersection where we're all like, hey, check this one out, Bill, because we're looking at it for this theater or whatever. So I think that's like also NPX, that brain, whoever came up with that idea, and I don't know if it was the
Whitty and Sullivan, I mean, again, though, it was an idea that came out of the zeitgeist when everything starts to bubble up. And again, an NNPN, why isn't there some sort of online database for work?
yeah.
At the same time, literary managers were being overrun by scripts that had nothing to do with what they needed to produce.
Yeah.
You couldn't find the right play. It's why, one of my big things has always been about why on earth does every theater in America need to do the most recent off-Broadway hit?
Yes.
They're not, it doesn't speak to your community. You're just
Right.
doing it because they did it in New York and it was a big hit, right?
Mhm.
So I was really frustrated with that piece of it, of the New York Times being the literary manager for the American theater.
Mhm.
Really was done with that idea. And I was Jason Lowith, who was then the executive director of NNPN. He was having similar discussions with the NNPN world about should there be some sort of clearinghouse? Could we hire someone who would serve as the dramaturg so that our NNPN people could come to them and say, I really need a three-hander that's got a 65-year-old African-American actress in it because I've got this actress that I want to use. And it all kind of coalesced into this idea. And then that idea got massaged and developed collaboratively. And then we did that, whatever it was, 18 city tour where we talked to actors and directors and designers and dramaturgs and playwrights and people from little organizations and big organizations. If there was an online database, what would you want it to do? What would you want it to not do? And then the beta testing and all that development. And then because we've been lucky enough to continue to receive funding for the tool, we've been able to keep the prices really low.
Yeah.
And and yet still continue to roll out new developments every quarter. And now 5.5 years in, we are going to be migrating. I think we'll probably be very close to 50,000 plays when we move to the new platform.
I was about to ask what, because it's like every time we would gather, the NNPN family would gather for a meeting, it would have grown by like 5 and 10,000 people. And I was like, holy, because when I became AD, I think we had just broken 25,000, and that's not even 3 years ago.
Yeah,
And
so
so,
we'll be at
yeah,
40 in the next couple of weeks.
yeah.
It's coming along, and then
It's like a seed bank. It's like one of those seed banks in a mountain, in Sweden, right? And this is like becoming the seed bank of plays.
yeah, and it's fun to go in there, and I used to be able to go in and just put in the letter R and see what popped up. Now, back when there were 5,000 plays on there. Now you got to write whole words to get to what you want. But like I really love the the higher ed subscriptions. There's more than 1 million students now across the US and Canada that have access to the database through their college IP addresses. That's been really exciting. I got a letter from an artistic director this week saying in a company that's actually doing some live performances again, and they had some really specific needs to be able to do a live performance. And they were able to go onto New Play Exchange and find a play, and they're opening this week. It's, and I had a playwright who told me months ago, I should ask her what her new number is, but she had 11 full-length plays read on Zoom during the pandemic. One playwright.
Wow.
11 full-length plays. Because people can find them. I mean, if NPX didn't exist, the only thing you would have is what's in your library behind you and that pile of scripts that's on the floor by your desk that may or may not be right for what you're looking for. So we're really excited and grateful for those amazing minds like Gwydian's and Jason's that were able to take that and move it forward, and for the support of the board and the funders. Doris Duke did all the initial, put money into the initial development, and then the Mellon Foundation has given us $500,000 to do this new migration to the new platform. And it's, it has become an income generator for New Play, for NNPN, which we are very grateful for. And that money, it gets cycled back into our programming, of course, but also into the ongoing maintenance and growth. We keep going back to that word today. No, it's growing forward. It's growing. Everything's growing.
It is.
We're maybe just being able to see it a little more because we're in our gardens in a different way. To take that.
I'm so much more attuned to, I'm just like the robins. So we had these arrangements outside our front door, and they had winterberry in them, which is, I guess an American form of holly. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They're those red berries. And of course, in the wintertime, at this point, they're eating the last things they really don't like, but they're eating it. And there were robins like right outside our glass front door, just plucking those berries. And pre-pandemic, I would have been at the theater all day yesterday while those robins were like clustered around the front door, eating their lunch, right? And I think that has been a great gift for me, man. It was my backyard and my dogs. The colleagues in NNPN are like, oh, there's Bill's backyard, and Jordan, I'm like, Bill, I hear birds. I go, they're birds, and I don't know, there must be a cat because these birds are mad, right? Just that idea that you're out in nature.
Yeah.
That's still talking about the art. I mean, I really do think if I live to be 80 or 90 years old, I'm going to look back on this pandemic year, and I'm going to think about all the people we've lost, either directly from the virus, or I heard somebody in the staff meeting the other day, he's got some health issues. And he said, there's studies now or whatever articles out there about how if we went into this pandemic with health issues, that mortality rates are higher with people with chronic conditions because our ability to just be together and stuff is diminished. But for those of us who are like, okay, this great pause, how do we grow to something healthier when we come out of this? Not knowing we were going to be doing this a year. I mean, we're coming up on a year anniversary. I mean, I heard that on NPR. I'm like, wait, what? But yeah, we closed the Phoenix Theater on the Ides of March. We were supposed to have a full crowd for Matt Smart's The Agitators. I was there, the actors. It was a beautiful production. Michael Burke did a lovely job with Lauren Brigham and Jerome Beck. And now it was 30 people, but those 30 people are like, we've heard this is really good, and thank you for getting through to today. And then, we turned out the lights and shut up the building within 48 hours. And I'm like, a year. On that note, though, man, it's always so great to talk to you. And there's a lot here for those people who spend time with the interview to just like absorb. And I'm probably going to when this gets edited and Bob sends it out into the world, I'm probably going to be listening to this on my jogs. I do a lot of kind of meditation while I'm jogging and listening to podcasts and my therapist recordings, and I'm probably going to pick up a lot of stuff from this. So Nam, it sounds like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and not just March 4, but what's coming.
I really can. It felt like we had to get through the election and then the inauguration and the vaccine rollout, the real vaccine rollout.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's coming.
Yeah.
I really do feel like it's coming, and it's gonna, like I said, we're gonna grow back better. We're gonna be more integrated into our communities. We're gonna be doing work that speaks to more people, and we're gonna be using theater to bring this country back together, and that feels really, really important in a way that hasn't felt important to me before. So I'm so excited. And as always, hello to all my friends in Indianapolis. I can't wait to get back up there and see you guys again. I got to do a digital dinner at New Harmony a few weeks ago, and we're gonna have an NNPN annual conference in Indianapolis one of these years.
I know. That's another one of our great losses of 2020 was the annual meeting, but we'll make it happen. That's
Yeah.
great. That's
All
good.
right, let's go. We're gonna drive your poor editor crazy.
Yeah. Be well, Nan, and I'll be back in touch.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.